And again, thank you very much, Kendall.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming out to watch this. So first of all, I'm going to thank Sam Krieger. She mainly put this whole presentation together for me. Otherwise, this would have been very boring. So props to her. She is usually my groom in Florida, but she stayed home this year. So she's suffering in the cold with all of you guys. All right, so we will get started. So the beginning part of this presentation is mostly the nitty gritty, getting FEI passports and things like that. And then we'll get into how the actual FEI competitions run and what to expect when you're there. All right, so boring part, passports. If you're thinking about doing an FEI event, you want to start really early with getting your passports organized. There are a few different passport options. The main ones are you can either get this purple passport that you can see in that photo. That works anywhere. You can do that in Canada, US, across the world. The other option is the national passport. That one is a blue one, and that only works in Canada. And you can do only 1, 2, and 3 star. You can't do a 4-star with that one. So then once you upgrade that, you can get a recognition card, which probably doesn't make sense to many of you guys. But anyway, you can upgrade that national passport to get the FEI passport, and you don't have to pay the whole thing again. All right, next slide. All right. So if you're thinking about getting an FEI passport or wanting to do FEI anytime soon, the first couple things are you need to get a microchip done for your horse. It goes on the left side of the neck. It's not really that big of a deal, but you don't want to do it close to a competition since it's a decent sized needle. It usually goes up around where the braids are, so you would never notice it. And the vet can just scan the neck and find the number for you. And if you buy a new horse, usually they'll check to see if the horse is microchipped. The other thing that's a big pain is the flu shot situation. So normally most people just do their shots once a year. When you're doing FEI, they need to have a flu shot every 6 months. There's a little bit of leeway with the 21 days. If you miss that, you have to do booster shots, which are between 21 and 92 days. And you also need that to start out your passport. So if you're getting ready, and one thing to keep in mind is if you're going to the US, you can't have any shots done within 2 weeks of crossing the border.
The blue or the purple?
So yeah, just keep in mind everything you want to do with this, you want to do it early. So you're not panicking 2 weeks before a horse show trying to get all the vaccinations done and everything else, because you won't have time. All right. The boring part, you can find the application process online. You can go to the Equestrian Canada website, and there's a passport section. Then you just click on which type of passport you want to do. You can see the prices. The FEI is the one for everywhere. The national passport's the Canada one. And then when you want to upgrade the Canadian one so that you can compete in the US, then you would get the recognition card to add on. Again, you need lots of time to get these sorted out. So they'll send you the blank passport. You have to get your vet to fill it out, and then you have to send it back in to EC. And then they'll mail it back to you when it's complete. So it takes a while to process the whole thing. All righty, next one. All right, so the qualifications, that you have different qualifications depending on your level and if you're categorized. If you want to do a CCI short, that's what we used to call a CIC. Those ones you don't have to declare, you just have to submit your entry form and your mandatory results. And then if you want to do a CCI long, which is the one that used to be just a CCI, or it used to have roads and tracks even.
With other atoms, right? With certain
And then that one you do have to declare in advance. So the declaration deadlines are January 31st if you're doing more of your spring, summer ones, and then June 1st for the fall CCIs. Don't worry if you miss them. Typically, they're a little lenient with that, but you should try to declare in advance. And then, yeah, you need a platinum sport license. So obviously it gets more expensive when you do FEI. And then we're going to get into the minimum eligibility requirements, I think on the next slide. So an MER is you have to meet some basic criteria to qualify for your event. So dressage under 45 penalties, cross country, you have to jump around clean and then be under a certain amount of time, and then no more than 4 rails in show jumping. Next one. All right, so this is the chart that'll be helpful for anyone who is uncategorized, which I'm assuming most of you are if you haven't done an FEI before. So that means you haven't been going FEI for very long, or you're new to it. So you can see for the different levels what you need to do. So the CCI 1-star is the modified level. That's the new one. So because we don't have a lot of modified events, you can actually qualify to compete at a training event by doing 3 trainings, or you can do the EB 105, which is modified or above. And then you can see the three prelims to go 2-star, and then you can read the rest of that. But you can find all this on the EC website as well. If you guys don't know what categorization means, if you have been competing at FEI for a while, your results will count over the years. So you can end up getting categorized with A, B, C, or D. And that just means that you could fast track a little bit more. So I think I'm a C. So then I don't have to do as many prelim runs as you guys would have to do to qualify for the CCI long. And then someone who's done a bunch of CCI 5-stars, they might get an A ranking, and
Pardon?
they would only have to do one CCI long, 4-star long to qualify, unlike the rest of us mere mortals who need 2. All right, so I think we can move on to the next one. So this one, the portal is very confusing to most people how to get there. It's not the easiest process. Once you get used to it, it's not a big deal. But your first step, you're going to go to the EC website, and then you go to sport, and you'll choose eventing. And then you should see on that photo that high performance is highlighted. So you would click on that. And then you scroll down until you find the authorization portal, which you should be able to see the little link at the bottom of that photo. From there, you would log in, and then you can see how to declare, enter, or add your MERs. It's pretty straightforward at that point. The hardest part is just getting to the portal. All righty, and then the next one. All right, so most of you probably know the horses can get drug tested. You might not realize that you as a human can get drug tested. You can find all of it on the FEI website, whether a drug is allowed for the horses. There's also a link there for the humans, or you can go to the WADA website, which is the World Anti-Doping Association, to find out if any of your medications are banned. There's an FEI app that you can download that will also, you can search it right on your phone if the substance is banned for the horse. I'm sure there's one for the rider. I have not found that yet. But you want to really be aware when you're going into an FEI event if you're going to do any medications or injections for your horse, you want to make sure that you plan that out well in advance because certain drugs have longer withdrawal periods. So if you are planning your FEI, you should have a good conversation with your vet early in the season, do a soundness exam so that they can help you out with that. And you want to double check all your supplements and liniments and everything else that they don't have any illegal additives. There's certain things that you would never think about, but they end up, you hear people testing positive all the time for things that they did not know were in their feeds or in the supplements. So just double check that. And then same thing for the humans. You want to make sure that even if things are legal at home, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're legal at a competition. So like weed, you cannot smoke weed at an event. So also many other things like crystal meth. You should probably not do that. All right, we can go to the next one. Okay, preparing to leave. So Sam was awesome and she made you guys a handout. So we won't have to spend too much time on these next couple of slides, but she made you a checklist for things to think about to pack. And definitely you can add your own things to that. Those are just some things that she was thinking of. One of the big things when you're getting ready for any competition, doesn't have to be FEI, you want to make sure you're taking your tack apart every now and then to make sure nothing needs to be fixed. Like double checking your stirrup leathers aren't starting to fray or tear. Same thing with your girths. And then giving yourself lots of time so you can get those fixed if you do or replace them. Definitely helpful if you label things and have them very organized for once you get to the horse show. One thing to keep in mind when you're traveling with horse trailer, it's handy to have an emergency kit that's really close by. So if anything happens on the trailer, you can deal with it as soon as you can. And then also to have a toolkit close at hand. So some easy things to keep: wraps, bandages, gauze, thermometers, betadine, vet wraps, scissors, antibiotic cream. Duct tape is key. And yeah, all right. Pack your tack, very obvious things, but you know, you hear of people that forget things like girths and bits. Yeah, so just, and you want to bring some spare things. You never know when you get to the horse show, you might need to change a bit, or like I said, if your girth or something isn't looking great, you might need to replace it or use a spare. And then because you're at the horse show longer for the FEIs, you might want to bring some schooling dressage boots, even though you're not allowed them in the ring. You might want to practice with the boots on. All right, and then the next one. All right, lots more information for you. It's all in the handout, but some of the key things on this slide. Make sure you check the weather in advance from going to the horse show in case you need some heavier blankets, especially if you're going a bit north or a bit south from where you're normally stationed. You might need to pack accordingly with your blankets. And then bring lots of buckets. You need the buckets for drinking, cooling out and icing. Sometimes I'll use a skip bucket for icing, but you also need a wheelbarrow or a skip bucket for mucking. And then, yeah, ice boots, stud kits, all the normal fun things. Hay, grain, and bedding. A lot of times you can buy bedding at the horse show, but it's quite expensive. So make sure you plan ahead, plan to pack extra hay and grain. If you're not sure how much grain you need, if you're only taking one horse, it's pretty handy just to use Ziploc bags and label them so you know you've brought enough for the week. And then all your supplements and everything. Again, double check that your supplements don't have anything illegal in them. And yeah, I think that's probably good for that slide. Boring, more grooming things, but also very important. Some of you may not know that there's a new FEI rule. You're not allowed to trim the hairs on the muzzle, eyes, or the ears. So yeah, no shaving whiskers this year. And you'll get disqualified if they see that you've done it. So we used to always trim them, and we've had to start letting them grow out, so they look a little sad now. And then your normal things, braiding stuff, brushes. I like to use baby oil around their eyes and their muzzle for the jog. Fly spray, show sheen, shampoos. If you poultice or any liniments that you might use, extra halters and lead ropes. You want to bring a vet kit as well. You cannot inject your own horse at a horse show, like especially an FEI event. You can get a vet to do it in a treatment stall, but just keep in mind if you normally do your own injections that, like with Adequan or something, that you cannot do that at a horse show. So no needles. And then baby wipes are a handy thing to have just to tidy up their faces. Sweat scraper, sponges, towels. All right. And then lots of things to pack for you, lots of clothes, all your show gear, schooling gear. You want to bring your jogging outfit. Definitely bring a lot of rain gear. And then yeah, boots. If you have extra boots, I always bring a spare pair of riding boots because I've had bad luck at breaking them at horse shows with the zippers going. So even if you have like a not great schooling pair, bring them anyway, just in case. Yeah, your vest, air vest, if you wear one, cross country watch, and yeah, normal sunscreen, hat, rubber boots, all those fun things for all the weather. Bring a parka. It usually is freezing. All right. And the next one. All right. So now we're going to get into how the horse show goes. So when you first get to the horse show, some FEIs are quite strict. If you go to Fairhill, as soon as you bring the horse off of the horse trailer, you have to go straight to in barns. So you want to have your FEI passport handy, and then you take your horse right to the vet. What they're going to do is they're going to check to make sure it's the right horse and that your horse's vitals are okay before you go into the barn. Most of the other events are not quite as strict, especially if it's a CCI short. So those ones, usually most people just unload the horses, put them in the stalls, let them settle in before they take them to the in barns. I like to get the stalls set up first before putting the horse in, especially sometimes you're at an event and you're on concrete. So I like to get the bedding in before I put my horse on that. And then once the horse is settled, then unload the equipment and set it up nice and tidy. Some things that you kind of forget when you get to an away show, the horses aren't turned out. So you need to be hand walking a lot more than you might on a normal day. Let them graze, hack them. A lot of times people will ride the horses twice in a day. If you have one that's a little on the lazy side, that might be a bit much for it. So like a walk hack is all it might need. Where if you have a hotter horse, maybe you're going to ride 6 to 8 times in a day to try to keep its brain in its body. And you might actually ride it a few of those times and then hack the other times. So you just need to know your horse, and sometimes it takes some experimenting to find out how to make it the most sane for the dressage ride on Thursday or Friday. And then because they're in so much, just make sure you keep picking out the stalls so it doesn't get too gross. One thing that's quite different from a normal event, the horses have to have their number on at all times when they're out of the stall. So I usually just use duct tape and some black marker, and I just put their number right on the halter. You usually get 2 show numbers, but they get pretty ruined if it rains or you have your cool out. So it's good to keep those ones nicer for the competition. All right. And then the next slide. All right, so for the in barns, you need your passport. The vet's going to check to see that the TPR is normal. So if you don't know what TPR is, it's the temperature, pulse, and respiration. I have put that down just in case you don't know what it is. You should definitely write that down and know it. A lot of times the pulse and the respiration will be on the lower side at this point because they're quite fit. But you want to start to know your horse and you want to know what's normal because especially after cross country, a lot of times you'll see the temperatures get quite high. They'll get up to 103 plus degrees Fahrenheit, and you've got to cool that down pretty quickly. So start to know what your horse's normal is so you can keep track of how they're doing. Now the vet's going to take your passport. They're going to check the markings that they match the horse, and then they'll also scan your horse's neck to find the microchip. They also check the vaccines to make sure you've got them within the 6 months and that you did that initial booster that we talked about earlier. You want to make sure the horse is well turned out. They used to check the legs and actually feel them. In the recent years, they've changed that. So now they just look at the horse and they'll take note of anything. Like if your horse has a bump or some wound or something, they'll write it down, but they're not actually going to feel the legs. And then they're going to keep an eye on that to see if that changes throughout the week. For a CCI short, this is typically when you're going to jog. They'll just make sure that your horse is sound and ready to continue to compete. So if it's a CCI short, I'll take the horses in a bridle to the in barns. And then I'll practice jogging before I get there. So you don't want to get there and have to drag them down the jog lane. So make sure they're ready to go. Sometimes you can pre-ride before that if they're not as strict to make sure they're loosened up after the trailer ride. And then just make sure, especially if you have a long way to drive, that you've checked the in-barn hours. If you have a 12-hour drive, you don't want to get there the last minute and find out that, what's the question? The cosmetic blemish. You don't actually have to notify the vet unless they ask you about any blemishes. Usually they don't say anything. You can have like a huge splint and they're not going to say anything. It's just if the horse went lame, they'd keep in mind that if that bump was there before cross country or not. Yeah, and then just keep in mind that you want to make it to in barns before they shut down or else you can't compete. So if it's a really long drive, you may have to actually leave a day early to make sure you get there for the in barns the next day. Alrighty. All right, so for the jog, the ground jury and the vet are just confirming that the horse is sound enough to compete. Again, if there's anything that shows up, they'll write it down, but if it's nothing that's going to stop the horse from competing and it looks sound, then they're not going to say anything. The jog is one of the scariest things. When they say accepted at the end, it's quite a relief. And sometimes, especially if you have a horse that hasn't jogged much, it might not jog that well the first time. It might be spooky at the flowers or it might not trot at all and you have to drag it. So they may have you immediately turn around and re-jog. If they think the horse was looking a little bit off, then they're going to put you in a hold. And at that point, they'll have a vet take a look at the horse. You'll jog in front of the vet, and then that vet will recommend whether they think you should represent or withdraw. And then that vet will mention if they see anything. So if you have a horse that hoof tests positive, then they'll mention that it seems to be in the foot or something like that. So the main part, so you want to be, a lot of the jogs, the main thing is you want to be very respectful to the ground jury. So you want to, it's basically like a fashion show with your horse, but you want to do country club attire. So not You don't want to show any cleavage and have things blowing up, or you want to be tasteful when you're doing that. So when you're choosing your outfit, you want to choose wisely. No heels. If you're running in a dress, I would strongly recommend practicing first. You sometimes learn the hard way that a dress that you ran in the store in didn't move much, but when you actually do it at speed with a horse, it gets a little more billowy than you expected. So definitely practice before you actually go to a jog in case the outfit is not going to be the right one. So the horse has to be braided. I would braid tails if your tail's not pulled. And if you do braid your tail, make sure you don't do it until the day of the jog. If you do it the day before, they'll rub the tail out and then it won't look very pretty. Keeping the white legs clean is not the easiest thing sometimes, and they get stained pretty easily. So Sam's put a nice little tip here. If you have white legs and they get stained, that you can actually make a paste with baking soda, ivory soap, and then you scrub it into the white area, leave it for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you spray it down with some vinegar and then rinse it off. And it makes most things get pretty white. You can also use, oh, that's a good one. Betadine scrub also works, yep. And white spray paint if you're really desperate at the end. And then, yeah, I mentioned earlier, the baby oil around the eyes, muzzle, and noseband helps to add some shine. And then for hoof oil, you're usually jogging on some sort of dirt or practicing dirt. So if you wait until right before you jog down the jog strip, it'll look a little tidier. If you have a horse with dark legs, you can get away sometimes with that black hoof polish, but that only works if they don't have white on their legs. And then the most important part, make sure you train in advance for the jog. You don't want to get there and find out your horse will not jog, and then not be able to compete. So you want to practice really early. When I was getting ready for Rolex, the vets had me start practicing in March, beginning of March, and I had to jog every day in a bridle to train Ed to jog properly because he was not ideal. But if you have a horse that doesn't jog well, it might be 100% sound, but because of the way it's jogging and it might be crooked, then they might spin you in the jog. So it's just not worth it. So make sure you practice a lot until they go off the aids, they jog in a straight line. And yeah. Should tattoos be covered up? That's the good question. I probably would, I guess it depends on where they are. I would probably say yes, but I don't know that there's a rule. Yeah. I think it would depend on where they are. All right. So for our next part, we have a what not to do. We have Julia, who is our very lovely victim, and she wore all the things that you shouldn't do. So I'll point out a few things in this picture that you would not want to do at your jog. Obviously, he's not braided, and in a halter, you want to present in a bridle. You would not usually bring a dog to your jog. Open-toed shoes and heels are a no-no. And you shouldn't be wearing jeans, especially ripped ones. You're going to find out in a minute that she's also wearing a lovely backless shirt that looks great, but unnecessary for your ground jury. So we're going to watch this masterpiece of jogging. All right. So a few things going on. She's not even on the jog strip. Turning the wrong way. And then that's obviously a great running style. We haven't even jogged yet. you would wonder if that horse ever got trained to jog. So those are a lot of things that you don't want to do at your jog. Hopefully the next one helps show a little bit more what you want to do. Oh, we get to watch it again.
Sorry, it was such a great performance. When I hit
Do a
next,
redo?
it replayed it automatically.
I think everyone needs to see it again. She did such a good job. Like, look at this run style.
The
It's
shuffle. I like
it's
the knee turn
amazing.
and shuffle. It's
Yeah.
really nice.
It's pretty unreal. The laughing of me laughing while videoing is pretty good on this one. All right. So this is me jogging now. So you'll see I turn him away from me. That is one thing a lot of people don't think of. So make sure you always turn that way. And then if you watch how he's jogging there, I've got him in a bit of a contact. One thing that you have to practice with is some horses will jog better in a contact. Others might jog better if they're a little bit more loose in the contact. So that's something you want to practice that a lot. You can use a whip. Again, you want to practice with it. On this horse in particular, if I think I might be carrying a whip there, but if I actually went to use it, he'll just spin out and stop. He's not a fan of whips. So you want to make sure that you have the whip out of the way and you only use it when you need to. If your horse resembles a kite during the jog, basically when I have one that's really wild, what I'll do is if you look at how I'm holding the reins there, I've got both hands on the reins. If I have to get out of the way, I'll just hold the rein in one hand and I'll drop my other hand down and I'll try to stay out of the way. I'll like open my arm out and then I'll stay out of the way and sort of run on the side of them and hope that they settle. A lot of times at the big jogs, you see a lot of horses rearing and bucking and cantering and doing all sorts of crazy things. So you do your best to get through it. If it doesn't show much proper jogging, they may make you represent right away. And then the other thing with the jog, make sure that you choose when you're running, you want to choose a focal point. You want to be really straight. A lot of times you see people looking at the horse as they're jogging, and then the horse won't jog in a straight line. So again, practicing choosing that focal point, running in a straight line. Don't look at the horse because then they don't jog straight. And then even when you make your turn, when you circle back to go back to the ground jury, make sure you look straight ahead. And then we didn't have a ground jury for this, but make sure you just trot right past them. So when you present, you walk in, halt, the ground jury makes sure it's the right horse, and then they'll tell you to proceed. And then you trot on, you walk at the end, and then you trot back and you just run right by the ground jury. And then they'll hopefully say accepted. All right. Okay, so then once you've passed your jog, then you get into the dressage phase. For a CCI long, it's usually over 2 days, so Thursday, Friday. So again, these shows are quite long. A lot of times, like let's say Bromont, we get there on the Tuesday, we jog on Wednesday, dressage is Thursday, Friday, cross country Saturday, and then we jog and show jump Sunday. So you need to know your horse a little bit. Again, for the hotter horses, you might need more pre-rides or practice rides. For a duller horse, you might need less and might need more hand walking. You're allowed to lunge. You can also do jump schooling. So what they'll do is they'll have a ring set up that you can set whatever jumps you want, but there's a ring steward there. You have to sign up for that one. So there's always an official watching. So sometimes you might have a horse that's better if you show jump school before dressage. Others you might want to do between dressage and cross country. So you are allowed to wear tails for FEI. you are not allowed to wear, or you're not allowed to use a whip. So that's a big change from national. And then helmets are mandatory. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's a photo under there with me in a top hat from Rolex. And then the key for any competition, doesn't matter if it's FEI or national, ask questions. Your TDs and officials are there to help you. So if in doubt, get everything checked from the TD, make sure your bit's okay. There's a girl that I think was at Young Riders got eliminated because her bit was legal for national but not FEI. So you don't want to get there and run into that problem. All right, we'll get on to cross country. Oh, never mind, we're on to studying. All right, so when you're getting ready for your cross country, you're going to be studying. So make sure you've actually competed with studs in your horse before you get there, so you know how they are. Some horses aren't a fan of big studs and others really need them. So you want to start to get to know your horse so you know which type of stud is going to be better for them. So the studding will depend on a few things. Obviously the horse, then the footing. So you might have harder dry ground with grass. You might have really deep mud. And then the level that you're going to compete at. So the higher levels, you're going faster, the jumps are bigger, the turns might get a little tighter. So those ones you'll typically need some bigger studs. The lower levels, you can get away with a little bit less sometimes. You might have a plan A for what studs you'll use, but you want to make sure you're checking that footing the day of the horse show for cross country. You may have to keep checking it throughout the day. If you go at 3 in the afternoon and it was pouring all night, it might, and it's dry during the day, it might start to dry up for you, or vice versa. If it starts to pour, you might need to be adding in way more stud than you originally thought you would. So just be aware of that, ask questions. You can ask, I always ask other riders what they did and what they found, because sometimes you'll have someone that went out early and they'll tell you that they needed way more stud or something. So everyone's there to help. Everyone's usually quite happy to give you some feedback and let you know what worked and what didn't work for them. So don't be afraid to ask questions. There's 3 types of road studs. You got the road studs. I don't use really. I usually I just go straight to grass tips or mud ones, but you can use road studs for damp grass with firm ground, a wet arena, or low levels. Usually by the time you're going FEI, you're going to go more to the grass tips or the mud ones. So the grass tips, you can see on the photo, R and S are both grass tips. And those ones are probably the ones I use the most. And then the mud ones are the chunkier ones. So you can see at the very top, like A, B, C. Those ones are more of your mud ones. I only ever put the grass ones on the outside. Since they're sharper and more pointy, you're more likely to do damage if you have them on the inside. They're more likely to stud themselves. So even though they're called mud studs, a lot of times I'll combine on, like here in Florida, just running a regular event, I'll just combine, I'll put like the R stud on the outside, and then I'll put more of like J or A on the inside. So it's giving them a little bit, but not a ton. Yes, you want more. I like the chunkier one that's a little flatter on the inside. I always have the sharper, longer one on the outside, so they have a little more traction. I don't really mind if they're not super level. Like if the inside one's a little shorter, unless you're running on really cement ground, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. But I do try to make them a little bit more level. Again, if you look at the picture, like S is a longer stud than R, and if you look at the top studs, like A and C are quite different. So I would match the longer studs together and then the shorter studs together, depending on if they're front and back. So I usually stud longer in the hinds and then shorter in the fronts for higher levels. The low levels, I'm not as picky. A lot of times I only put a grass tip on the outside and nothing on the inside for low levels. And then definitely keep your boots on while the studs are in. So even I'll cool out the horses with their boots on and studs in, and then once their breathing's down, then I'll take the studs out and take the boots off, and then I'll bath them again. But especially once you get those bigger, sharper studs in, you don't want to risk them stepping on themselves, especially when they're nice and fit at an FEI event. Alrighty. Four shoes. I've had some bad luck in the last bit I usually only put front shoes on the lower level horses, and then hind shoes only once they start going like training at home, but prelim here in Florida, since we're on sand here. But we've had so much wet weather here that we actually put hind shoes on all the horses this week, because it just wasn't worth it. They were sliding so much. But yeah, typically I don't put back shoes on pre-training horses unless they really need them. But I also won't stud if I don't have them in the hinds unless I'm really desperate, because I don't really see the point if they don't have that traction behind. So I'll just wait to do studding once they've got four shoes. Any other questions on the studying that anyone wants to text in? All right, we can go to the next one. All right, so the cool out is a lot more formal at an FEI. As soon as you cross the finish line, you'll see a herd of vets coming at you, and there's tons of people, and everyone has a whole setup at the cool out. So the vet's going to come and check your TPR, so your temperature, pulse, and respiration, as soon as you finish. They usually have someone with them that's writing down all that information. And then after that, they'll check the horse every 10 minutes. They want to make sure that your horse is coming back to normal really quickly with their breathing and their temperatures. Keep in mind, when the horse finishes the cross country, usually their temperature is lower than 5 or 10 minutes later. Usually if you guys ever go for a run, you might feel fine while you're doing it, and then as soon as you stop, if it's hot out, you just start to heat up as soon as you've given yourself a bit of time to cool out. So the horses are the same way. As soon as they sort of let themselves down a bit, then their temperature goes up. So you will see like 103, 104 like at 5 or 10 minutes, even though they might have been 102 when they came off the cross country. So that's not abnormal, but your goal is to cool them out as quickly as possible. So you want to have a cool out team to help you out. If you don't have help, everyone's really good. Like usually you'll see all the Canadians helping out each other. If you're riding later in the day, a lot of times those riders will help the people riding earlier in the day, and everyone's really good to pitch in and help out. So as soon as you're crossing, then your team will come and start taking your tack off. They'll start bathing the horse. You want to set up your buckets. So basically you have someone on each side sponging the horse and scraping the horse while you keep walking through. And you're just going to keep walking the horse and bathing it as quickly as you can and getting that hot water off. As soon as the water hits them, it's going to heat up. So you want to scrape it off right away to help cool them faster. And then the vet's going to check them every 10 minutes. So you're just going to keep repeating that process. At this point, I leave the boots on probably for the first 5 to 10 minutes with the studs in. And then once they're cooling out pretty well, then I take the studs out and remove the boots. You can see if the horse wants a little drink, but make sure you don't let them drink a full bucket right away. So just little tiny sips. So some of the things that you're going to take to your cool out, which you can do well in advance, like people will set up a couple hours before their cross country so that they don't have to worry about it. So you're going to take buckets that I would recommend putting your name on, sponges, sweat scrapers. You want to take your magnetic plate for your studs with your wrench. I like to take a bit of a vet kit, like duct tape, vet wrap. If you have like a diaper or anything for the horse's foot in case they lose a shoe, you can always bring some gauze. Basically anything that might help if they've nicked themselves or anything right away. If it's anything serious, there's vets there, so they're going to help you out with that. Bring a cooler if it's a cooler day. If it's hot out, you're fine. And then you have to have your horse numbered at all times. So pre-number your halter. So it's easy when you get there. You don't have to move your number over. And then a lead shank. A lot of the horses are quite wild at this point because they're feeling pretty pumped. So if everyone's a bit different how they feel about lead shanks with chains, but I'd rather be too safe than sorry. So I usually bring a chain lead shank so that I can have control all the time in case they get a little rank on me. All right. And then next one. All right. So if you ever go to the barn at an FEI, especially the high levels, it's pretty interesting because there's so much going on. The Sunday afternoon, evening gets to be a bit stressful with all the icing. So you want to stick with 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off for the icing. Again, and you want to make sure you practice in advance to find out what your horse likes. Some horses will stand in buckets with ice or skip buckets with ice, and they're very well behaved. Other horses will lose it if you do that and fling the buckets across the whole stall. So the ones that don't love straight ice buckets, there's a few other options. You can get zip up ice boots. You just throw the ice straight in them against the leg. There's pocket ones. There's whirlpool ones where they're a bit like an ice bucket, but they're way fancier. But it's ice boots or ice in water. You can get Ice 5 boots, compression boots. So you want to test out what they'll do. There's lots of different options now. Like I just got a pair of the Ice 5s so that I can put those on easily at the one-day horse shows and not have to worry about having bags of ice with me. And then the whole time you're going to ice on and off for a bit, but you want to make sure you add in some hand walking and jogging the horse so you can keep an eye on where the horse is at. Sometimes the horse is going to look amazing right after cross country or an hour or two later, but give them 4 to 6 hours and then they start to stiffen up, and you might have to do a little bit more work with the vet to make them feel their best for the next day. All right. So just some things that you can do. There's lots of options. These are just a few little ones. So most people will wrap the legs after they've been iced. You can do poultices, liniments. So yeah, there's Sornomore. Omega Alpha does a TEDA that doesn't test. There's Equithalasso or the muds. The cryotendon is one that is an icing mud. And then there's draining clay that you can do after that to help with taking any swelling and soreness out. But those ones you don't actually wrap over top of. The clay poultices you do wrap over top. The downfall of clay poultice is Sunday morning. You have to get up really early to make sure you have lots of time to clean the legs off before you jog. So that's not always the most fun process. And then back on track wraps are always good to help get more circulation to the legs. Most times you're going to want to pack the feet. It's usually a good thing to do just in case as preventative. If it's muddy, you might not need to, but yeah, Magic Cushion is a good product. If they have pads, you can't pack the feet. So sometimes high level horses, if you put in something like Equipack, you put it in for cross country and then you pull it out for overnight so you can ice the horses and pack the horses. and then they might put it back in the morning of show jumping. That's a very expensive, not fun option, but I've had to do it before. So you want to know the horse really well to know what the best option is with that one. If you can get away with it with like a rim pad or something like that, then that's obviously easier because then you're not having to pull the pads out. But yeah, you do what you have to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so magic push cushion is good. It does get everywhere and it's quite sticky and it can blister the horses. So I like to put Vaseline or baby oil on the horse's heels to make sure it doesn't blister, and you can actually get it off on the jog day. Rebound's another product that you can pack the feet with. Epsom salts and betadine is a very simple one that everyone usually has those ingredients. Yeah, so those are just a couple options, but I'm sure there's many, many more. And then same idea, you can do stuff with the body, like back on track type blankets. Those Eclipse muds you can actually put over their top line to help take any soreness out. They look pretty fancy when you have mud across their whole backs and people think your horse rolled in the mud, but they do work. Yeah, you can do things like absorbing baths and liniments, but again, just double check everything's legal. Natural supplements and electrolytes. There's lots of tubes of electrolytes and things that help just boost the system after a long cross country. For the upper levels, like especially the 3-4 star level and a hot day, a lot of times you're going to see people go on put their horses on IV fluids just to help the horses replenish all those all the water that they've lost and all the fluids they've lost. You can also get things like Adequan and Legend given. For anyone that doesn't know what they are, those are joint supplements that Adequan you do intermuscular and Legend you do IV. But those just are kind of an all body help with all the joints. So if you have any, especially older horses, they usually benefit quite a bit with that, and we'll give them to all ages. Oh, I miss Kitty's thing. Well, I'll have to get back to some of these questions after, but whether they're really effective within 24 hours or not sure. But again, at this point, you're gonna throw the kitchen sink at them and try absolutely anything to help them feel as good as they can for the Sunday jog. If you have a horse that's been getting Adequan or Legend regularly, it will probably make a bigger difference, I think, than one that doesn't usually get them, because I think they'll have a bit more of a buildup in their system. But it can't hurt. I think it's better than nothing. And then you can do some alternative therapies, but you definitely have to have they have to be approved and checked in with the officials. So just double check before you ever have anything done like this, that it's actually someone that's allowed to be in the barns and that it is actually still approved and okay to do. I think with the PEMF treatments, it can be done if it's on a lower frequency, but it can't be if it's too strong. And the rules always change. So just the key is to ask before you do things so you don't get eliminated for something stupid. But any of that stuff will help as well. All right, so Sunday jog, same deal as the first one. I typically pre-ride morning of, whether I need to or not, just in case. It gives me a better idea where the horse is at and how they're feeling, and they're usually pretty tight behind. I usually ride thoroughbreds, so they're almost always a bit tight behind. So the pre-ride just helps out with that, just riding them long and low. And it's not for very long, 10, 15 minutes, just to help them out a little bit. And then when you go to the jogs, you want to just give yourself enough time that you're walking the horses out and you practice your jogging over there. You don't want to just show up 10 minutes before the jog and hope the horse is ready to go. And then on the jog outfit, aside, definitely dress for the weather. As you can see, the one photo, it's torrential rain, so raincoats are a good idea. Not a dress in that case. Yeah, and then obviously it was nicer weather at the middle photo. But yeah, I wear dresses a lot, but not when it's cold out. Alrighty. All right, and then show jumping. Again, there's a few little differences from a regular horse show. So when you go to walk your show jumping, you're expected to be dressed in your show clothes. And then it's usually in reverse order at this point. Frank the Tank. And then, so when you're doing your warm up at home, a lot of times we have a cross rail, a vertical, and an oxer. And you might have someone that changes the height of those, but those jumps just stay the same. When you go to the bigger events, usually they have 4 to 5 jumps set up, but all of them have enough standards and poles to be an oxer. So you can have a groom or someone helping you out that's going to set that jump, and you have a jump to yourself when you're 4 rides out. And then you can just build it up however you want. When I go to the lower level events, a lot of times you see people jumping the cross rail 50 times, and then they jump the vertical 100 times, and then they probably have to jump the oxer another 100 times, and then maybe they have a break and then they redo that whole thing. When you get to the higher levels, you don't want to waste those jumps. You don't want to do that at low levels either, but try to get more efficient with your warm-ups. Like, you might feel like you need a lot of jumps to warm up, but your horse really only needs like 5 to 8 jumps probably to get warmed up. So just trying to get a little more comfortable with how quickly you can do how efficiently you can warm up, so you're not wasting the good jumps, but you still give your horse enough time to warm up appropriately for the job. And then another difference, the hind boots, when you go to warm up, there's going to be a ring steward in the warm up, and you have to actually apply the hind boots in front of them. They're going to check that there's nothing inside the boots. There used to be, well, you can still get them, but they have these crank boots that you could actually add like a piece in there, so it actually add more pressure on the back tendons, so they'd really kick up behind. So that's the main thing that they're looking for, that you're not cranking the boots and you're also not adding anything in that's going to help create that kick up behind feel. You're also not allowed to have weighted boots. So another thing that you want to do, they always have a scale at somewhere that you can check the weight of your boots. But you want to check the weight of your boots before the event, because you may get randomly selected to have yours weighed. One thing to keep in mind, a lot of the boots are quite light, so you're not going to have to worry about it even if they're wet. But if you're one of the people that has to use like sheepskin or something for your horse's legs, those boots get quite wet if it's raining. So you want to weigh the boots once they're wet, so that you know, worst case scenario, how heavy they are. Again, they're mostly looking to make sure you're not adding weights to your boots to try to make your horse jump better or higher. So most people are probably fine, but just want to double check. And then you have to salute in FEI. So they've changed it that you don't need to salute in show jumping for normal events, but you do have to salute for FEI. All right. And then that is all we got. So here's Sam, the one who helped make this presentation in all her glory. Oh, no, you don't have to wear a medical armband ever. Yeah, you don't have to wear it national or FEI anymore. For walking the cross country, usually they open up the course after there's usually a rider meeting on the Wednesday before the jog. So usually they open up tree on the Wednesday, and then you have the whole week. So you can walk it a few times. I guess I can look at this chat. And then I don't know if
Yeah,
you
I
want
can
me
read
to
some of them
unmute.
too for you
Oh,
if you
okay,
like.
perfect.
So I guess it's the question was medical armbands and FEIs. And then when will you walk cross country?
Yeah, so that one you can do usually the Wednesday onwards, depending on when the horse show starts. But it's anytime after, they usually open it after the first rider meeting, which is typically if you're jogging on the Wednesday, they usually do that rider meeting on the Wednesday before in the morning. And then it might be a little later if the competition is shorter.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the ear hair? The point that you made was like the sensory ear hair.
Yeah,
But
I haven't gone anywhere with this rule because it's brand new. So as I read it as like clipping the inside of the ear. So like the outside, if you're clipping your horse for the winter, like the outside of the ear would be fine, but like the actual inside hairs, like when you actually like open up the ear and like clip that section, that would not be okay.
okay.
Is the way I read it.
Maybe we can do an interpretation and send that out to
Yeah,
everybody once we get it's like, can you clip like the ear hair flat?
yeah,
So they don't have that
exactly.
they have the
Yeah,
hair
I think like
sticking
those
out.
grandpa hairs, you can probably trim those, but you can't like do a close shave. But I'm doing my first FEI event in like 2 weeks, so I'll probably have a better idea once I see what those horses look like.
Yeah, or you're gonna have to get like ear hair extensions.
Yeah, I'll get like a
uh,
bonnet
yeah,
of
exactly.
ear hair.
There's Paige asked a question is like, how many days prior to the actual event do you arrive to the venue?
So that's going to depend a little bit on how far you have to travel. So like a Bromont is only 6 hours for me. So that one, I'll just get there the day before. Um, if I'm going to drive pretty far, like a 12-hour plus one, I might go a little sooner, especially if we're getting into the bad weather at home and the event somewhere nicer. So I might want to actually ride outside to prepare. Or like last 2 years ago when Elise went to Young Riders, they went, I think they got there on the Saturday and the competition started on the Tuesday. So they had time to get there and get settled in because it was a 3-day drive for the horses. So if you're going that far, you want to give the horses a chance to actually settle in, recover, and then still be able to peak for the competition.
Um, do you have RV parking or do you get a hotel?
I usually Airbnb because we don't have any living in our trailer, but a lot of people will do RV parking. A lot of people have trailers with living, or they have a camper that they'll bring along, which is pretty handy. I'm not one of those lucky ones. So we go with RV, or sometimes I straight up just stay in my trailer and it has no living. So that's my smellier option.
It's not when you're competing, right? Because it'd be nice if you could actually
Sure.
clean up before the jog,
Oh
right?
man, when we did Fauché last year, I just stayed in the trailer
Okay.
and didn't have living. Sometimes we jumped in the river to shower. So yeah, it was pretty good. And then if anyone had an Airbnb, then you just try to borrow either showers there or at a hotel. So not
That's
ideal.
it. Got a couple more.
All right. Oh,
So are shad bellies necessary for dressage at any level of FEI?
I don't think they're actually mandatory. Typically, you'll see at 1 and 2 star levels, a lot of people will still be wearing just regular jackets. Usually, by the time you get to 3 star and up, people have started to purchase shad bellies. I don't think they're actually mandatory. I think it's just the style, and most people want to buy them when they can because they look cool. Oh God, the budget for a horse show, that's the terrifying part. It's like $1,000 for an entry for an FEI event.
I
So it's
know
expensive.
I know with Carolina and got canceled last year, it was close to $800 for stay.
Yeah.
That was before we actually even factored in the hotel.
Yeah, that's what I just paid my Red Hills, and it's $900 for a CCI short. Plus, yeah, then you have to do your hotel and food and then you're away for a few days. So if you have a real job, then you don't necessarily make money those days.
Yeah, let me quickly check. I don't think Willow Wind was actually that expensive though.
It's okay. It's like, I think it was only 300 or 400 because there's no stabling, and they only did it over one day. So I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, but Bromont, anybody remember what Bromont?
Romont's 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. The entry, so when they're 1,000, that's with stabling. So if it's a CCI long, stabling's mandatory. So it always includes the stabling. When it's a CCI short, you can ship in like Willow Wind. So then they usually add it on. So you might see the entry fee as like 500, but then you'll have to pay 200 or 300 for the stabling.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing too is with your buddies, get a tack locker to share, because those are always really nice. Like,
Yeah, especially if you're gonna have some bad weather, have somewhere dry to sit.
exactly, or lock your
Yeah.
dogs up.
Yes, that is a good one.
I guess anybody don't, if you want to get off of mute and ask Kendall a question, as I said,
See if I'm missing any.
she's very good at answering all the questions.
I'll do
And
my best.
yeah, the ear and the nose hair one will be interesting, because I'd hate to call her out, but I think it was Katie Bondrigger that told me about it. I know she's on mute right now. She may not get off of mute, but she did bring that up to me about the nose and the ear hairs a while back. But we can find out and actually figure out what is sensory ear hair.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's just the inside ear hair. But yeah, I'll find that out. And I'm gonna see if I'm missing any of these other ones.
Yeah, I'm scrolling up.
Some examples of liniments that are safe. So I know definitely the Teta is safe with omega alpha. I know there's Soar No More, there's one that tests and there's one that doesn't test. So I don't use it, period, just because I can never remember which one tests. So I panic too much. One thing on the whole testing thing, because I've heard some horror stories from people. If you have a horse, so you want to be super careful with the FEI ones, obviously, well, any of the horses, but sometimes people will put like bute for a horse, they'll put it like in the grain scoop and then throw the whole thing in the horse's stall. And then I heard a horror story that had been going on for a horse, but the horse who was fed next in line, there was some remnants in the grain scoop still. So they actually tested positive when they got drug tested at some point at a horse show. And then that trainer got banned, or they got some sort of fine for it. So you want to be really careful in your barn that none of the drugs, like if you do have an older horse on medication, that there's no way that the horse that you're competing could accidentally get it. Or if you put the grains in the stalls, that people are very aware that yours doesn't accidentally get put in that stall, just in case. Yeah,
And Voltaren too. Voltaren, you got to be very careful if you're using it on yourself, not to touch FEI. It's Voltaren, isn't it?
yeah, because that's got ibuprofen in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doug's got a good question. The sensory hair trimming ban is only an FEI thing, or is it an EC
Yes.
done the same?
That's a good, we should double check that, because EC usually doesn't like to make their own rules, and it's safe to say that it'll be the same. I haven't seen it released yet as an EC rule, but yeah, we'll double check that one. I just went with I left all the hair on all the horses just because I figured they'd switch it over for everyone.
And so Stephanie asked this question, and Stephanie, you may have to come off of mute, but her question is, how is the qualifications for FER moving up the level? So I guess if you were to do a 1-star, what would be your Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think she's looking, what are the minimal eligibility requirements to do a 1-star? What do you have to do for a 2-star? I know we have that in the slides. I can go back and we
Okay,
can
yeah.
talk about that.
So there's the minimum, which it's not necessarily what means like what people should do. So if you want to do a 1-star, you only have to do 3 training level events with the minimum requirement. You might, but if you went and you did 6 events and you were eliminated at 3 and you got around 3, that doesn't necessarily mean you're ready to go and run a 1-star. Same thing with the 2-star. Like there's not many riders that have only done 3 prelims that are going to be ready to go out and do their first 2-star, because it's usually quite a big step up. So where that's the minimum requirement, obviously it's, you want to get a lot of experience, and you don't want to just blow both your brain and your horse's brains by throwing them at a CCI right off the bat. But yeah, you can get away with that, and you definitely have some horses and riders that are more experienced, or you sometimes just get a really good horse that they really only need the three runs and they feel ready to go. So a lot of it depends on your horse, and you want to have a good relationship with your coach so that they're going to tell you if you're crazy or not to be doing it. Yeah, it's definitely better to be overqualified than sneaking in. Yeah, so you want to feel super comfortable. Like if I'm getting ready to do a 2-star long, that I'm basically thinking that this horse is should be ready to upgrade after that, not necessarily going to upgrade, but that they should be getting ready. The double bridle question, I think it's advanced now. I think they just changed the rule last year because Liz Holiday Sharp got eliminated in dressage for using a double bridle at a 3-star. So that was, I think, a new rule last year. But I think you can still use it at horse trials for intermediate. So yeah, they did change that rule.
Wow, and that's hard when you're
Yeah.
an upper level rider and you get eliminated for that. That's why you
Yeah, and
probably
that's
said,
someone who like wins all the time. Yeah.
do you have to have an individual coach, or can you get by using multiple coaches?
Oh, like you don't necessarily have to have a coach at the event, if you're fine with that, but I would recommend having one at the event. But yeah, if you have a dressage coach and a show jump coach, or someone that helps you with one thing and not the other, like you could have many coaches. I have multiple coaches a lot of times. So yeah, it's what a lot of times you get dressage coaches just help you specifically with dressage, and then a jump one as you get going. Any other questions?
Hi, Kendall.
Hey.
I was wondering, so to apply to do the CICs at Willow Inns for July, do we need to have registered in January 30th?
Oh, so that's only for CCI long.
Okay, yeah.
So those are CCI short. So you don't have to even declare for those ones. You just have to send the entry in. I will admit, I have never once made that deadline for entering a CCI long. I think they'd really like you to do things on time, and at some point I'll probably get fined for it because they always threaten those things. But there's so many times that you get a horse that like it could be going training right now and has a great season, and you bump it up to prelim and it's ready to do Bromont, maybe if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But you don't really go into the season planning that when you're still in your indoor arena in January. So yeah, they'd like you to do those declarations on time. I mean, they don't cost any money, so if you're even thinking about doing anything, it doesn't hurt to just throw the declarations out there and then you're done. But yeah, I typically do it once I actually have a game plan and it's a little more solid.
Okay, and to declare, do we need to have our horses registered with the microchip and the shots? Because I've only registered for my FEI passport.
So when you get your FEI passport, you'll have to have they'll put all the shots and the microchip in there, but it won't get approved unless you have the microchip. The
Okay.
actual shots, though, that only comes in when you're actually at the horse show, because they'll double
Okay.
check all those things.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. I think if there was any other things that I forgot to tell you guys. Yeah, I think that's it, unless anyone has any other questions.
Okay, we're getting some thank yous. Again, Kendall, this was great. First time you did it virtually, and you did.
Now we're getting more questions.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay, I'll stop. Okay, so how many people can you bring with to help you?
Oh, okay. So at a normal show, a normal one, they're not as picky, but as you get up the levels, they start to put fencing security around the barns. So then they get a little more picky. So usually you get, I think, your own wristband and then 2 others. You can sometimes get extras, but usually you can get 1 or 2 grooms in with you. So sometimes that's an owner, or you might get an owner if you have a specific owner. But yeah, you can't just have every family member in there. Like if you go to Rolex, you get limited passes. But yeah, for the lower level ones, they don't really care.
So we have a quick question, then Katie Baker's question is really good because I want to hear that. So Katie wanted to know, it's like, how far in advance should you plan for, like, begin the process for your FEI passports?
I'm planning right now. I need to get 1 or 2 passports done for mid-April competition. So I'm going to be going through that process starting now. And I've probably left it a bit late. So that's giving me almost 2 months. Partly for me right now, because I'm out of country, that I've got to mail things to Canada, which I found out today is $90 to $100 if you do it with UPS. So that adds on a big expense. So otherwise I'm doing regular mail. But yeah, it takes a long time by the time if you need to get your microchips done, but you need to get the microchip done before you can even apply for the passport. So you want to get that done early. If you can time it with the vet coming at another point, just do that at that point. And then you've got to get the vet out again once you get the passport back. So you get 2 vet calls at least, plus your flu shots. And then you've got to mail the passport in. You get it mailed twice. So it takes a bit of time. Yeah, the Jockey Club one's fine. It's compatible. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of, they're starting to require microchips across the board for everything. So a lot of the newer horses might already be microchipped, where the older ones hadn't been. I got a horse in that had a microchip rather than a tattoo this year. So yeah, they're definitely moving more into that.
Yeah, Kitty just
Yeah.
mentioned in 2017. So Kitty wanted to know a little bit more about your experience at Rolex, if you can share.
All right. The whole thing or parts of it?
And Kitty's on mute. She's usually quite
I'm going to come
vocal.
off mute
Yeah,
because
you
it'd
can
be
come off
easier
mute,
to
ask
ask.
the questions.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously you walked us through step by step, but how did you feel going into your that first jog at Rolex, going down the chute into the
first
Rolex
one?
Stadium?
Not so
Yeah.
bad. The last one, not so great.
I was gonna say Ed was a little stiff, if I remember.
Yeah, we got a little fancy for the last one. Yeah, the first jog, it's well, you never jog with an audience typically, so it was kind of cool just having that, and yeah, there's so much atmosphere and energy that it's pretty exciting. And that first jog, you're really hoping your horse is down at the first jog, so you're not hopefully that stressed out at this point, and you're just happy to be there. If you get basically at Rolex, the way it works, the more steps you get through, the more stuff you get. So like when you get there, if you make it to Rolex, they give you like a stall plaque with your horse's name on it and the Rolex year, or I guess Kentucky year. And then If you get through dressage, and then if you jump one jump on cross country, if you get over the first jump, you get $500.
Nice.
You don't have to finish. They call it a travel, something like a travel thing, like just for getting there. But they don't want you just to do dressage and then not continue. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, then after that cross country, obviously tons of icing. Laura Richard, or Laura Chalmers, as more people might know her now, was my groom, and Ed had stifled himself on one of the drops in the water, and she had her arms in ice, like holding ice against his stifles for hours, and she was awesome and did a ton of icing. And another thing I didn't mention earlier, the barns have hours. So usually the barns close at 10 or 11 at night on the Saturday. They don't open until 5 or 6 in the morning, usually 5, I think, in the morning on the Sunday. So the horses can get some rest. But the hours that it is open, if the horse is a little bit funky, you are icing the whole time or doing whatever you can to make them feel better. So yeah, she was in there icing the crap out of him. And then the day of the jog, he was not 100%. So we experimented with all sorts. Has terrible feet, so we were experimenting with all sorts of hoof packing and everything else to see what would help. So that was one of those times where we had packing in for cross country, then we pulled the packing out for icing, and then we threw more in. And then I'm pretty sure we changed it once or twice before the last jog. And then, yeah, that jog was terrifying. I think I might have got held and then represented and got through it. But yeah, that's one of those times where it's the most terrifying part about your whole competition, and then the biggest relief when you get through it. Because especially if you've gone through cross country and you've had an awesome go, you still could have your whole weekend ruined by that. Obviously, you don't want to compete on a lame horse, but a lot of times they're just body sore at that point. Like that's a 12-minute cross country run. And obviously they don't usually do 12-minute cross countries on a normal day. So they're tired, their body's sore. If they have bad feet like he did, there might be a little foot sore. So you're just trying to keep them happy and comfortable to get through show jumping. And they get a sweet long break afterwards. Yeah.
At what point did it mentally sink in, oh shit, I'm at Rolex?
That's a good question. I'm probably like probably getting in the stadium, not even like probably necessarily like the jog part, but like probably like riding around the stadium. And I remember it's such a long walk from the barns to the stadium that I was walking down like with Mary King, just like a normal day, just chatting. Like, oh yeah, you just won everything and you're awesome. And then I'm like nobody doing it. So it's kind of cool when you get to be with all those big riders and get exposed to it. And you get almost more, you get just as much as attention as the big riders, because especially if you're a new one there, then everyone's always really excited about the first timers. And then everyone likes a story. So like Ed being an off the track thoroughbred who is pretty lame and got retired like 10 times before I took him there. People like that story.
Exactly. Katie asked a question here. It's like, how long do you typically give your horses off after an FEI?
It depends a bit on the level. Like higher levels, I'd give them more time. I mean, 1 or 2 stars not going to take a ton out of them, so I would usually give them like a week or 2 light or off. But I don't do a ton unless the horse has had a really busy season and it's pretty tired. Especially like once you're getting up to advanced, then I would usually give them like a month, not necessarily off, but just lighter, like that they're hacking and giving their bodies a break and a bit of a mental break. But yeah, I do less at the lower levels and more as they go up the levels. And a lot of times, like a lot of the Rolex horses and stuff, they'll get a bit longer than that. They'll get 4 to 6 weeks off or hacking.
That was great. We're right at time. I'm going to
Awesome.
stop the recording. Kendall, thank you again. We are so lucky